On the Tai Chi Hall, Li Chengqian angrily said, "The Crown Prince, don't do it." After speaking, he led more than 20 riders and headed west all the way. From then on, there will be no more princes in Zhenguan. A few years later, when someone petitioned for the appointment of a new crown prince, the civil and military officials who were angrily rebuked by Li Chengqian stood up one after another, rebuking them. "The crown prince of our dynasty is in the western regions, creating the foundation for our Tang Dynasty for eternity. Why should we appoint a crown prince again?" At that time, Li Chengqian fought Murong, defeated Ashina, and was full of energy. "Where rivers come, where the sun and moon shine, who dares to welcome my Chinese flag?" Keywords of the novel. This prince, don't do it. No pop-ups, this crown prince, don't do it. Download the complete TXT collection, This Crown Prince, Don't Do It. Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1 Volume 1. The Crown Prince preparing to run away from home. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Volume 1. The Crown Prince preparing to run away from home in the 5th year of the Zhenguan reign. Donggong. Looking at the pavilions and towers in front of him, Li Chengqian felt extremely unreal. He never expected that he had actually traveled. And it crossed over to Li Chengqian, the eldest son of Li Shimin. This made him feel very uneasy. Who is Li Chengqian? The Crown Prince of the Tang Dynasty. As a senior VIP at a certain point in his past life, he has read countless novels. Even if he is a historical illiterate, he knows the tragic life of this unlucky prince. Moreover, in his past life, he was still a skilled craftsman on a certain music platform with millions of fans. Can we not live too comfortably? As far as his conditions are concerned, he can't even get a spot to travel through an orphanage. Who helped me get through the back door? He cursed wildly in his heart. It's not good to cross into someone, but to cross into Li Chengqian. Not to mention his miserable life, the key is that he is afraid of revealing his true self. Although it blends the memories of Li Chengqian, you expect him to be a guy who occasionally has a fragrant mouth in later generations. Just because he blends Li Chengqian's memories, he becomes a polite heir to the country. Isn't this really a joke? Easy to change, hard to change, okay. Just now, 2 palace maids were muttering, "Your Highness, what's so strange today?" Both palace maids could see some anomalies, not to mention his absolute eternal Emperor Laozi, and the Empress's mother of that generation of virtuous empresses. That's all. We haven't even mentioned famous officials like Fang Xianling, Du Ruhui, and Wei Zheng for generations. And there is also the cheap uncle of Changsun Wuji, who can be called a 1,000-year-old person. Li Chengqian had no confidence in wanting to show no flaws in front of a generation of human spirits that had been proven countless times in history. No, we have to run away. Calm down, Li Chengqian muttered to himself. There's no way. The identity he travels through is the Crown Prince of the Tang Dynasty, the Crown Prince, and the foundation of the country. If there's anything wrong with him, it raises suspicions of Li Daitao becoming stiff and stealing dragons and phoenixes. His fate is probably not far from the Meridian Gate. Moreover, the matter of revealing the truth is really just a matter of an instant. After all, his handwriting with a brush is no different from that of a dog scratching, so it's strange not to reveal the truth. Besides, even if he stayed and didn't reveal his secrets or let him deceive him, he knew very well that the person who would become emperor in the future was not Li Chengqian. He doesn't think that he is a descendant who knows more than these ground beetle, so he can really break hands with them. Are you joking? Not to mention Lier, just those guys in the court now. Which one is not someone who has reached full combat experience? He doesn't have the confidence to fight them. Thinking about it, Li Chengqian returned to his study and flipped through the map. The boundaries of the Tang Dynasty were unbearable. As long as one leaves the territory of the Tang Dynasty, or rather, gets rid of Li Chengqian's identity, with the experience and skills of his descendants, it is not a big deal to make a name for himself in this era. Glancing at the map. In the 4th year of the Zhenguan reign, Li had already turned Jie Khan into a dog, and by this time, the Tang Empire had already reached Lake Baikal to the north. That is to say, it is impossible for him to go to the north. If he goes further north, he will go to Siberia. Helpless, Li Chengqian could only turn his gaze to the northwest direction. In the end, he finalized a place. Tuyuhun. In just an instant, combined with the knowledge of later generations, he had a simple development plan for Tuyuhun. Although Tuyuhun was ultimately defeated by Li, from the map, Tuyuhun's location is definitely the transportation center between the Tang Dynasty, the western regions, and the northern desert. If Li still doesn't have the ability to protect himself when he knocks down Tuyuhun, he can still choose to continue westward. The place has been chosen, but how to leave has become a new issue. As the Crown Prince and Crown Prince of the Tang Dynasty, his every move is highly regarded by others, which is beyond our control. Your Highness. Just then, a eunuch hurriedly arrived at the door of the study. Because he had heard the whispers of the 2 palace maids before, he drove all the palace maids and eunuchs away. To put it simply, he was still feeling guilty and afraid of revealing his true feelings. The study door was not closed, and upon seeing the hurried demeanor of the eunuch, he asked, "What's wrong?" "Your Highness, there was a mistake during the personal guard training, and many of them were injured," the eunuch said as he looked at Li Chengqian's face. Seeing that Li Chengqian didn't react much, he added, "I heard that everyone was injured quite a bit." In fact, generally speaking, Li Chengqian doesn't need to personally handle such small matters, but this eunuch has some conflicts with those guards, and at this moment, he deliberately came to apply eye drops. As soon as I entered the Marquis' gate, it was as deep as the sea. Not to mention the court, but within the Eastern Palace, various struggles were also common. After hearing the eunuch finish speaking, Li Chengqian's eyes lit up and he had a solution. "Let's go and take a look." After speaking, Li Chengqian walked out of the study. Upon hearing this, the eunuch was even more delighted. "Originally, I only planned to apply eye drops, but to my surprise, His Highness the Crown Prince did indeed personally inquire, and now he is leading the way with great fanaticism." On the way, Li Chengqian carefully reviewed that unlucky memory. In the Tang Dynasty, military training was actually very strict, and what he didn't expect was that the court also provided a certain proportion of casualties for military training. That is to say, within a certain proportion of casualties, the court will not investigate. This was not mentioned in the books he had read before. However, it can also be understood that since Li took office and was forced to sign the Wei River Alliance, he has been feeling frustrated and hoping to find a place. To find a place, he naturally needs an army that can fight well. Overall, Li's sense of revenge is actually very strong. "Don't go to the school field, go and see those wounded soldiers," Li Chengqian ordered. The eunuch responded without saying much, and immediately took Li Chengqian to the wounded camp. When Li Chengqian arrived at the wounded soldier camp, several prosecutors, Tang Dynasty military doctors, were examining the injuries of the wounded soldiers. Those with sharp eyes saw Li Chengqian and immediately stopped their work, bowing and saying, "I have seen His Highness the Crown Prince." When others heard it, they were just like him. No need to be polite, Li Chengqian waved his hand and said, "How is their situation?" Speaking, Li Chengqian took a closer look. Several guys are unconscious at this moment, and even more, they are groaning in pain and bowing just to hold on. Those with minor injuries are fine, but those with serious injuries, as long as their wounds don't ulcerate, may be able to save their lives, said the prosecutor who spoke before, shaking his head. Li Chengqian was overjoyed in his heart. He had already figured out a way to leave this haunted place, but still needed to make some preparations. Immediately, he said, "Anyway, let's save their lives first, and I'll come up with a solution for the rest." As soon as those wounded soldiers heard what Li Chengqian said, they suddenly gained strength one by one and kept shouting to be loyal to the crown prince, but Li Chengqian actually didn't care about the reactions of these wounded soldiers, or in other words, he didn't care about the lives or deaths of these wounded soldiers. What he cared about was that this matter gave him a chance, a legitimate opportunity to leave the Tang Dynasty. End of this chapter. Chapter 2, Volume 1. What Transverymen Do. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2, Volume 1. What Transverymen Do. For several consecutive days, Donggong only did one thing and spent money. Since learning that his personal guard was injured, Li Chengqian has had an idea. Brewing, purifying high alcohol for personal hygiene and healing. As a skilled craftsman in a certain music field in his past life, brewing and purifying alcohol was not a big deal for him. Of course, it doesn't matter whether the guardian can be cured, what's important is that he has a reasonable excuse to do this. So in the past few days, Donggong has customized a large number of brewing tools, and the remaining money has been spent on grain. The reason why he did this is intentionally to find a reason for those civil servants to impeach him. You should know that in the early years of the Zhenguan era, due to continuous wars and food shortages, the common people couldn't even eat enough. As the heir apparent of the Tang Dynasty, he spent such a huge amount of wine making, which is definitely a manifestation of immorality. The crown prince is immoral, does not empathize with the people, spends too much on food, and is greedy for pleasure. Those civil officials must impeach him like crazy. Moreover, Li Chengqian confiscated and hid some of it, ordering people to purchase grain in Chang'an City recklessly, causing chaos throughout Chang'an City. The crown prince was brewing wine in the East Palace. On that day, Li Chengqian arrived at the newly built brewing workshop, where a group of eunuchs and palace maids were busy. For brewing, the people of the Tang Dynasty were not unfamiliar, but the wine brewed in this era, in Li Chengqian's view, was bland and tasteless, like the sweet potato wine that later generations would drink somewhere. To be specific, it's like mixing 2 pots of water. And what Li Chengqian needs to do is distill high alcohol. The cooked rice has been fermenting for 6 days, and the fermentation time is almost over, so he came. In the past few days, he hasn't done anything either. Apart from arranging for his subordinates to prepare distillation tools, he also studied the mortality rate of wounded soldiers in the Tang Dynasty army. It's really not that I don't know, it's quite a shock. The current mortality rate of wounded soldiers is surprisingly high at 70%. To be honest, after arriving at this high mortality rate, he only felt incredulous for a moment without much emotion, but instead had a hint of joy. It's not that he's cold-blooded, it's true that he hasn't been in the Tang Dynasty for a few days, and he has to be constantly wary of revealing his true feelings. He lives very cautiously, so he really doesn't have much intention to empathize with these unfamiliar people. To put it bluntly, at this moment, even if his nominal parents, Li Heir or Empress Changsun, had passed away, he would have acted a little sad, but his heart was probably completely calm. Ultimately, emotions cannot be inherited. Are you all ready? Li Chengqian asked, putting aside the chaotic thoughts in his mind. The eunuch in charge of the brewing workshop was the one who was preparing to apply eye drops to the guards before. After Li Chengqian arrived, he waited on the side and immediately replied, "Your Highness, everything is ready." After speaking, the old eunuch looked at Li Chengqian hesitantly. "Just say what you have and don't stutter." Upon hearing this, the eunuch whispered, "Your Highness, some people in the court are quite dissatisfied with your Highness's actions." Li Chengqian didn't react much on his face, but he felt happy in his heart. Isn't this exactly the result he wanted? What else? The eunuch whispered, "Some people say that His Highness's move is wasteful of food and detrimental to the court." After speaking, he stopped speaking and just stood quietly on the side. Li Chengqian smiled and understood. This guy was reminding himself, all right, no matter what they say, just do our own thing. After speaking, Li Chengqian arranged for everyone to prepare for brewing. Distilled liquor is actually not difficult, compared to the brewing of liquor in the Tang Dynasty, it has an additional distillation process. This process requires a still, and for the current Li Chengqian, it is impossible to create a still like in later generations. However, as a skilled craftsman in the past, there is no problem with getting a homemade still. Quickly, Li Chengqian had someone pour the already fermented rice into the pot, and then had someone put on a still that had been modified with a steamer. In fact, the called modification is simply opening a hole in the steamer according to the requirements, connecting it to a bamboo tube, and then the distilled wine flows out along the bamboo tube. After all the preparation work is done, put a pot of hot pot on top of the steamed bun. After all this was done, Li Chengqian said, heat up the heat a bit, fill the hot pot with water. A group of people may not know why Li Chengqian did this, but he is the crown prince. No matter what he says, everyone will do it. When the heavenly pot was filled with water, everyone looked at everything strange with suspicion. A brave palace maid even whispered, "Is that enough?" "It's ready," Li Chengqian said. "By the way, go get the jar and gauze you were asked to prepare before, and place them under the bamboo tube. As for gauze, it is used for filtering." Speaking of gauze, Li Chengqian truly admired the wisdom of his ancestors. At first, he thought that the Tang Dynasty did not have gauze. After all, the gauze he had come into contact with was made of cotton. But it was only after he tentatively asked that he found out that the Tang Dynasty had already had this thing. "I heard that there is a spinning tool called a spinning pendant, whose age is still unknown." After the palace maid placed the jar, a group of people watched and waited on the side. Except for Li Chengqian, everyone is curious about what will happen later. It didn't make people wait too long, and a strong aroma of wine drifted out along the bamboo tube. Almost everyone was stunned by the smell. "The aroma of the wine is too strong, isn't it?" said a young palace maid in a low voice, her face full of disbelief. Li Chengqian didn't pay much attention to these things. After waiting for a while, he asked someone to replace the water in the heavenly pot with cold water, and at the same time, he took the first pot of wine aside and continued to distill. Tubuo liquor contains too many impurities, and in his later years, it was rarely consumed by people. After all, it was a life-saving thing, so it was better to be cautious. And after that, the wine had almost the same meaning as ergotu. "Your Highness, does this wine taste too fragrant?" At this moment, the eunuch standing next to Li Chengqian swallowed with makeup. Li Chengqian smiled and said, "What is this guy's mind? He knows a bit about it, but he doesn't care. After all, it's not easy for anyone these days." "I dare not waste such a good thing," the old eunuch smiled. "All right, this thing smells good, but if you really want to drink it, it's not that you can't drink it. After finishing work for a while, I'll reward you with a jar of good wine." Upon hearing these words, the old eunuch immediately expressed gratitude. Without further conversation with the eunuch, seeing that the wine had already come out, a big stone fell in Li Chengqian's heart. To be honest, he is really worried that after crossing 1,000 years, his method will not work. Since the wine came out, he no longer worried about it, but pondered how to take advantage of such a good opportunity and leave Chang'an in the West. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. 1,000 gold buys horse bones. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. 1,000 gold buys horse bones. After brewing the wine, Li Chengqian had no intention of continuing to purify the alcohol. Although it is not difficult for him to purify alcohol, after thinking about it, the danger of purifying alcohol is too high, and existing technology is difficult to control such risks. Moreover, at this moment, he, to put it bluntly, is only a 13-year-old child, and his behavior is too demonic and inappropriate. Secondly, he also calculated that the alcohol distilled before had the highest alcohol content close to 70 degrees, although it did not meet the standards of medical alcohol, it could still be used. To be honest, there used to be a mortality rate of over 70% among the wounded soldiers, but some of them still managed to survive. With alcohol, how could it work? His biggest goal in brewing wine was to find a reason for the officials to besiege him, so that he could have a chance to throw a splash out of Chang'an. Take the jar of wine tied with red silk and let's go see those wounded soldiers. The wine has come out, it's time to go and take a look. Although he didn't mean to save them, saving one more would give him even more confidence when he splashed it. Still the old eunuch, upon hearing Li Chengqian's words, he immediately arched his body and cautiously hugged the wine jar before following up. The wounded camp was still like that day, and from a distance, one could hear the howling inside. These days, getting injured is really deadly. Li Chengqian has also been risking his life to warm up these days. These days, he really can't afford to be injured. As soon as he arrived at the door, a medical officer who was cleaning the wounds of wounded soldiers with salt water put down the gauze in his hand and saluted, "I have seen your highness before." As he spoke, his eyes lit up as he looked at the jar in the eunuch's hand. Others, including the wounded soldiers, saluted him in unison. Li Chengqian nodded before asking, "How is their situation?" "This is all thanks to your highness," said the prosecutor and the sick child officer, who then shifted his gaze from the jar held by the eunuch and immediately changed his flattering expression. "It's strange to say. After your highness explained it earlier, we also sought help from familiar eunuchs, and they all found it difficult, especially those who were seriously injured. But since his highness sent this physiological saline and gauze that night, and instructed us to wash the gauze thoroughly with boiling water, and then use this physiological saline to clean their wounds, in the past 2 days, we have clearly seen some improvement. Especially those with minor injuries, it's not a big deal right now. Staying here means helping us take care of the injured. This guy is called Zheng, and it is said to be a member of the clan of the famous Dr. Qiao Yuanfang from the previous dynasty." Of course, Li Chengqian does not know who Qiao Yuanfang is. As long as it works, Li Chengqian nodded. He didn't take this seriously either. The reason he did it at that time was just to increase some chips in the upcoming storm. And the so-called physiological saline is really just saline, at most it is made from coarse salt into fine salt. As for whether saline can be used as physiological saline, he is not sure, he can only say that it is a dead horse treated as a living horse doctor. But he didn't care, while Zheng was extremely excited. Qiao is a true medical enthusiast, and for him, all of this is like opening the door to a new world. In recent days, as he watches the wounded soldiers gradually improve, he is more excited than those wounded soldiers. This is also why his eyes light up when he sees the jar held in the arms of the old eunuch. "Your Highness, what is in that jar?" Zheng stared intently at the jar held by the old eunuch. Upon hearing this, Li Chengqian took the jar from the old eunuch's arms and said, "By the way, it contains wine." Upon hearing it was wine, Zheng's eyes immediately showed disappointment. He finds it difficult to arouse interest in matters unrelated to medical practice. Seeing him like this, Li Chengqian smiled and said, "This is not ordinary wine, it is very useful for disinfecting their wounds." As he spoke, Li Chengqian explained to him how to use it. Upon hearing that it was related to medical practice, Zheng immediately became interested and listened attentively to Li Chengqian's account. And behind him, the old eunuch was immediately stunned. After spending a lot of time brewing wine from food, it turned out that it was to save the lives of these guys. Immediately, he exclaimed in disbelief, "Your Highness has exhausted the wine brewed in the East Palace warehouse, which is for these guys." As he spoke, he looked at the wounded soldiers again with a puzzled expression on his face. Upon hearing what he said, the wounded soldiers were immediately stunned. Although they also heard that the crown prince had exhausted his warehouse and bought a large amount of grain to brew wine, they never expected that this wine would be brewed for them. In just an instant, several of the injured guards, who had already recovered from their injuries, knelt down on one knee. The wounded soldiers who were still on the sickbed were not as agile as them, so they had to maintain various strange postures and shouted along with them, "Thank you for saving your life, Your Highness. We are willing to follow Your Highness to the death." As soon as they finished speaking, Li Chengqian quickly shouted, "All right, come on, stop tinkering. Whatever you want to do, wait until your injury is healed before you talk." He is really not used to these people kneeling down at any moment, and at the same time, he has not realized that this is truly an era where people die for their confidence. Behind him, the old eunuch smiled knowingly and did not speak again. On the side, those prosecutors and sick children's officials were also a bit dumbfounded. They didn't expect that the recent uproar in the East Palace about brewing wine was actually for these guys. Take a look at me, take a look at you. The only exception may be Zheng, a medical idiot. When he heard Li Chengqian talk about the uses of these high-level wines, he immediately lifted the seal of the wine jar, and suddenly, a strong aroma of wine drifted out, filling the entire room. "It's a pity to treat these guys' wounds with such good wine," the old eunuch said in a gloomy tone. Not to mention him, even the guards nodded. As the guy who had just taken the lead was about to speak, Li Chengqian waved his hand and said, "It's not a pity. This thing is more alcohol than alcohol, and it's not meant to be drunk. Don't be fooled, hurry up and prepare to clean their wounds. If the wounds ulcerate, it will be a big trouble. By the way, you have to be careful. This thing is more effective in cleaning wounds than physiological saline. Alright, you guys are busy, I'll leave first." When Li Chengqian thought of disinfecting his wound with alcohol, his whole body was filled with excitement, and the feeling was too sour and refreshing. And hearing him say this, those wounded soldiers are also a thriller. They have seen it before when using physiological saline to clean wounds. Surprisingly, this thing is even more powerful than physiological saline. Of course, it's not that they're afraid of pain, but this kind of sourness is something they've never experienced before. "Your Highness, should we go back now?" The old eunuch didn't care about that and immediately asked. Li Chengqian thought for a moment and said, "No, go out and take a look." It has been several days since he came to the Tang Dynasty, and he has never left the Eastern Palace. He was afraid to reveal his true identity before. These days, he has made some adjustments to the distribution map of Chang'an City, which is why he wants to go out and explore. "Then I'll arrange for the personal guards to accompany me." As soon as the eunuch finished speaking, the several guards in the room who had recovered from their injuries quickly arched their hands and said, "Your Highness, we have almost recovered from our injuries. Let us guard your Highness's safety. Please grant your Highness your permission." "Okay, it's just the four of you." Li Chengqian is not familiar with the other guards, so he might as well take them with him. Moreover, he seemed to vaguely understand the exaggerated exclamation of the old eunuch just now. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Volume 1 Proud Era. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Volume 1 Proud Era. After leaving the palace gate, Li Chengqian and his four guards wandered aimlessly through various markets in Chang'an City, hoping to hear the opinions of the people of Chang'an City on his brewing. But what surprised him was that along the way, whether it was peddlers or beggars along the street, when it came to his large-scale purchase of food and wine, it was all a humorous joke with a smile on his face. So he bought some mantu and gathered them among a pile of beggars. He asked, "Don't you think it's a pity that you just heard about the prince wasting food to make wine? If you can share these grains, how can you not be hungry?" "You are so impolite," the older beggar said. "Why do you give us other people's things? We are hungry and we cannot bear it ourselves. What do we do with others?" Then the beggar bit the mantu in his hand. His words stunned Li Chengqian, they were so tough. With a smile, Li Chengqian continued, "Look, isn't this just for you? I want to." Before he finished speaking, the beggar who had just swallowed the mantu said, "I'm in trouble now. You gave me a mantu, and I remember your kindness. As for the prince, he is willing to give it to me. Of course, I'm not stupid. He can beg if he doesn't give it to me. Don't you have a chance to meet him? However, just because the crown prince has not given it to me, I cannot say that the crown prince is not good, right? He didn't spend one of my big sons on brewing wine. He spends his own money whatever he wants, which really violates the laws of the Tang Dynasty. Naturally, the emperor and Laozi will take care of him. What does it have to do with us beggars? My brother is right. If others are willing to give it, we will take it. It is a kind person. If we don't give it to us, we will find our own way to eat, but we can't blame others. Another beggar also shouted while eating mantu. The other beggars also nodded their heads. If they hadn't swallowed the mantu in their mouths, they would have said something. And their few words really shocked Li Chengqian. After careful consideration, he finally gained a preliminary understanding of the Tang Dynasty. The Tang Dynasty was indeed an era of openness, inclusiveness. This is not a posture from top to bottom, on the contrary, it is a confidence from bottom to top, or rather a pride that has been nurtured by thousands of years of civilization. No matter how much he tossed and turned in the Eastern Palace, nor how much the civil and military officials in the court felt for his behavior. But the people of Chang'an City, apart from envy, have no complaints about his actions. Even though some of them may not have enough to eat, Li Chengqian is wasting his food and brewing wine recklessly. Perhaps in their eyes, wine is only a temporary pleasure and has no practical value. But even so, Li Chengqian still didn't hear any complaints. The reason is simple, because this is a proud era. People disdain to pin their hopes on the generosity of others. They prefer to rely more on themselves. As for whether others waste food, wine, or indulge in extravagance, for them, it is ultimately just a story that they use to boast and force after dinner. As for the extravagant life of others, in their view, it is either their own efforts or the efforts of their ancestors. Regardless of who they are, the purpose of their efforts is not to enable themselves and their descendants to live a better life. Envy is okay, but resentment is not right. This is the mindset and pride of the people of the Tang Dynasty. Learned. With an arch of his hand, Li Chengqian stood up and left. Just as he walked out, his guards who had been protecting him all around followed suit. Lu San, are the people of the Tang Dynasty like this? Li Chengqian asked. Lu San, one of the 4 personal guards, was originally the third in the family, so his father decided to give him such a name. Yes, it's all like this. Lu San was a bit confused. Is there anything wrong with this? Li Chengqian nodded but remained silent. Most of the civil and military officials in the court felt that their actions were detrimental to the country and the court. 1 or 2 were writing fiercely to impeach themselves, but in the eyes of these ordinary people, it seemed like it was not a big deal. Perhaps this is what is called not being in one's position and not seeking political advice. With a bitter smile, Li Chengqian said, yes, last year Ashina Simo was captured and surrendered, and now he has become the prince of Huaihua County. This damn Tang Dynasty really embraces everything. Suddenly, he felt a bit restless, just like the tolerance of the Tang Dynasty. If he didn't travel through the crown prince, how could he still consider running away before he could thrive on this land? Just as Li Chengqian was feeling these emotions. At this moment, the residence of King Li Ku of Shu was quite lively. Li Ku, the 3rd son of Li Shimen. Because his mother was Yang Fei, a princess from the previous dynasty, he naturally became a close object to the elders of the previous dynasty as he carried the bloodline of the 2 dynasties. Your Highness, this is a great opportunity, someone said. Although they did not say they wanted to recreate the Sui dynasty, their support for Li Ku, who had the bloodline of the previous dynasty, was indeed appropriate. Li Ku was actually overjoyed in his heart. Although this matter may not have caused Li Chengqian to be dismissed, it is indeed a good opportunity for him to lose points. As the saying goes, freezing 3 feet is not a day's cold. Of course, thinking so in my heart, there was no expression on my face. Although Li Ku is only 13 years old this year, he has been raised by imperial parents since childhood, and his thoughts are incomparable to those of 13-year-old children in later generations. What opportunities do not have opportunities? The crown prince is just occasionally immoral, Li Ke said and instructed, don't worry too much, just do our own thing well. You are not officials. A few former court elders understood immediately upon hearing this. Not only in the residence of Li Ke, but also in the residence of King Li Tai of Yu, a similar scene is being staged. Li Tai was already favored by Li Er, and coupled with his own talent, he also attracted a large group of people around him. This gave him the idea of why not replace it. This time there was such a big mistake in the Eastern Palace, he just wanted to see how his crown prince brother ended up. At the same time, there were many people pondering the recent actions of the Eastern Palace. At this moment, the civil and military officials of Man Chang'an were either writing fiercely, condemning the crown prince for wasting food and seeking pleasure, or paying attention to every move of the Eastern Palace. There is no way, this is the importance that everyone places on the crown prince. By the time Li Chengqian returned to the East Palace, Chang'an City was already full of undercurrents, with a strong smell of rain and wind filling the building. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Volume 1 Impeachment Like Rain. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Volume 1 Impeachment Like Rain. Since the last visit to Chang'an, Li Chengqian, who returned to the East Palace, locked himself up in the study and even slept in it for several days. He is waiting for things to ferment, waiting for civil and military officials to compromise. During this period, officials from the Eastern Palace also came to him to inquire about the situation and prepare for the upcoming storm, but Li Chengqian did not see anyone and locked himself in his study. Of course, he is not an otaku in the study either. With this time, I happened to sort out the entire plan and did a simple rehearsal for any conflicts that would erupt in the court in the future. At the same time, he is also making plans for going to Tuyuhan. After all, in this era, anywhere is brand new to him. As for the crown prince, he really can't be taken seriously. Such a little nonsense, just a bunch of people impeach him. If he really wants to do something outrageous, then it's okay. One day, the old eunuch sent dim sum to Chengqian. After he put down the dim sum, he said carefully, Your Highness, the Duke of Qi asked for an interview. Duke of Qi, also known as Changsun Wuji. As Li Chengqian's uncle, he still cares about his nephew very much. If his nephew inherits the great prince in the future, how many more generations of wealth can his Changsun family have? Moreover, it is reasonable for him to come and inquire about the situation, as there has been a great uproar in the court. No see. Li Chengqian refused without even thinking about it. Are you joking? Recently, he really dares not see anyone. If this were to be exposed, it would be more of a problem than his extravagant consumption of food and wine. For this reason, during this period, he did not even invite Li Shimin and Empress Changsun for peace because he dared not. This is one thing that will inevitably be criticized in the future. After all, this is an era of filial piety. The old eunuch still wanted to persuade, after all, that was Changsun Wuji. Although he is now unemployed, who doesn't know that he will have to return to the court sooner or later? To embarrass him like this, at least in his opinion, is an unwise move. Besides, he also knows why Changsun Wuji came to find his own crown prince. Isn't it because there was too much trouble outside? He wants to understand the situation. Just as he was about to speak, Li Chengqian looked up at him and the old eunuch immediately shut up. What should be said and what should not be said, you know. Just before the old eunuch left, Li Chengqian reminded him again. This was not the first time he had said such things, but because the person who came today was Changsun Wuji, he emphasized it again. After all, only God knows how many people in the Eastern Palace are others' eyeliner. Of course, he didn't pay too much attention to the news spreading. Firstly, there were many people who knew he was brewing, but he really knew that there weren't many people he was brewing for, including the old eunuch and those in the wounded camp. Secondly, even if those outside really know the purpose of his brewing, those who should be impeached still have to be impeached. There are too many tricks here, and it's hard to explain them in just a few words. To get to the point, upon hearing Li Chengqian's words, the old eunuch quickly expressed his knowledge and followed him out of the study to reject Changsun Wuji. At this moment, Changsun Wuji was drinking tea in the side hall and was not in a hurry. Not long after, the old eunuch walked in with his legs crossed and bowed, saying, "Duke of Qi, your highness is currently busy. He said he will personally go to your mansion to pay his respects when he is done." He certainly wouldn't say 2 words directly like Li Chengqian did, "No see." But Changsun Wuji is not a fool. No matter how well he speaks, the meaning is still unclear. Before coming, he had already known that the crown prince had not even seen the officials in the East Palace these past few days. However, he didn't expect that he would also be shut down. But who is this guy? Changsun Wuji, a 1,000-year-old person. Although he felt a little unhappy when he heard this, he still said with a smile on his face, "Your highness is busy. I'll come back another day. I just want to ask what your highness has been busy with lately." The eunuch, of course, knew about Changsun Wuji's words, but in fact, he was inquiring about information and immediately said, "Your highness the crown prince is naturally diligent in national affairs." After a few unproductive conversations, Changsun Wuji also left. And when Changsun Wuji first returned to the mansion, in the palace, Li Shimin had already learned about Changsun Wuji's absence from Li Chengqian in the Eastern Palace. This bastard, is he going to die in the wine jar? Li Shimin was furious about this. He actually knew about Li Chengqian's brewing on the same day, but he didn't care and just wanted to see what Li Chengqian was planning to do and to what extent. Even though the impeachment memorials against the crown prince have been piled up on his desk these days, he has kept them in his possession. Of course, there is also a jar on his desk, which contains the fine wine brewed by the Eastern Palace. It was only today that Changsun Wuji came to see him, but Li Chengqian avoided him, which made Li Shimin furious. "Your Majesty, perhaps your highness the crown prince is really busy," the attendant on the side said cautiously. Upon hearing this, Li Shimin snorted coldly and said, "Do I not know? He has been staying in the study for the past few days, so what can he do? Besides, it has been half a month now, and I haven't seen him come to greet me and his mother. Is that how he reads books of sages? Brewing. Just know how to make wine. What is the style of the crown prince of the Tang Dynasty, who is skilled in craftsmanship?" The news that came earlier said that His Royal Highness the Crown Prince brewed wine to treat the wounded soldiers, not for the sake of temporary pleasure, as the outside world said. When the attendant was at the Qin Prince's mansion, he followed Li Er and dared to say anything. "Humph." Li Er still said displeasedly, "If it weren't for that, I would have already had these memorials carried to the Eastern Palace for him to personally review. However, what does he know about the Qihuang technique? It's because he still has those soldiers in his heart that he can tolerate his reckless behavior." After speaking, Li Er asked again, "By the way, how are those wounded soldiers?" Although he doesn't believe it on his lips, he is still very concerned about this matter. After all, the mortality rate of wounded soldiers in the Tang Dynasty has always been high. It would be a great surprise for the court if there were ways to contain the injuries of the wounded soldiers. It is precisely because of such expectations that he tolerated Li Chengqian's recent mischief. "There is currently no news," said the eunuch. Seeing the emperor's expression of regret, he added, "It hasn't been many days before or after. Even if it works, it may still take some time." Li Er nodded and glanced at the wine jar on the table. He gave a bitter smile and said, "So, if you ask someone to inform the crown prince and have him pay respects tomorrow morning, the bullets and seals will pile up like a mountain. If we continue to make trouble, it will damage the crown prince's dignity." The housekeeper let out a sound and then bowed out to arrange. After the eunuch left, Li Er suddenly smiled. For Li Chengqian's brewing, he really doesn't care. After all, Li Chengqian's actions have a reason, regardless of whether there are results or not, having this heart is good. End of this chapter. Chapter 6, Volume 1. Upward Court. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6, Volume 1. Upward Court. When Li Chengqian learned that he was going to court tomorrow, he was both excited and nervous. Excitedly, there will be a way to leave Chang'an tomorrow and escape from this place of trouble. It's normal to be nervous, after all, it's his first time going to court since traveling, and he deliberately avoided these people during this period, afraid of making mistakes in his performance tomorrow. If he reveals his true feelings, it would be a big deal. At the same time, the Prince of Shu, Li Ke's mansion, also learned of the news that Li Chengqian would go to court tomorrow morning and was immediately delighted. Your Highness, there is no news from the Eastern Palace that the Crown Prince has improved his brewing techniques and brewed wine with a strong aroma, which is one of the few beautiful wines in the world. If this were the Crown Prince's birthday gift prepared for His Majesty, although the Crown Prince's actions cost him a lot of food, his filial piety was not at a loss. At that time, Your Majesty and the civil and military officials of the Manchu dynasty may not be harsh on the Crown Prince. The speaker was a subordinate official from the Shu Prince's mansion, but he was only in his early 20s. Across from him sat a thin man with a goatee, aged around 40. Upon hearing him say this, he smiled and said, "This is not a big deal. The Crown Prince's actions are not a big deal. If we expect this to pull the Crown Prince off his horse, it's impossible. But now, in the court, it is said that the impeachment memorials for the Crown Prince have already piled up His Majesty's table, so our goal has been achieved." After he finished speaking, Li Ke, who was sitting at the top, smiled and said, "That's the truth. They never thought that they could pull the Crown Prince off the horse over this matter. To be honest, that's not realistic. Leaving aside whether the Crown Prince would use giving Li Chengqian a birthday gift as an excuse, even if not, it would not affect the status of the Eastern Palace. Speaking of breaking the sky, it's nothing more than wasting food and indulging in the desire for food, which is not a big deal. After all, His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince of the Tang Dynasty, has the right to enjoy this. Please ask His Royal Highness the King of Shu and Mr. Huaiji for guidance." The person in his 20s obviously didn't understand and immediately asked. This called Mr. Huaiji, with the surname Yang Mingde and the courtesy name Huaiji, was an old minister of the previous dynasty. However, he is now just a scattered official, a staff member of Li Ke, and also a long history prepared by him for his own palace. Now he is waiting for an opportunity to recommend himself to Li Chengqian. Upon hearing his question, both of them laughed, and Li Ke said, "Please help him clarify, sir." Yang De rubbed his goatee and said, "This matter doesn't affect the status of the Eastern Palace. All he can do is to diminish its authority. Moreover, this time, the vast majority of the civil officials in the Manchu dynasty have put up Danzhang to impeach the Crown Prince, which is enough. He didn't say everything, but that's enough. They are all smart people, just click on them." At the same time, Li Tai also learned of the news that Li Chengqian had asked the Crown Prince to go to court tomorrow. His reaction was no different from that of Li Ke. "There will be a play to watch tomorrow," Li Tai said with a smile. After finishing, he immediately ordered, "Prepare, I will also go to court tomorrow." Watching a play, of course, was meant to be enjoyable on the spot, but he never expected that tomorrow he would see a grand scene that he would never see in his life. And the high-ranking officials and nobles in Chang'an City have also learned the news at this moment. Of course, this news was intentionally released by Li Chengqian. Now, a group of civil officials led by Zheng are also preparing to launch a rebellion in the court tomorrow. For all of this, Li Chengqian didn't know. Of course, there was still some rough speculation, but at this moment, he couldn't control so much. After making some arrangements, he locked himself in the study and rehearsed tomorrow's play in his heart time and time again. "Humph, you want to see me laugh? I'll show you a big one tomorrow," Li Chengqian said silently, still feeling a little excited. The main reason is that the thought of tomorrow, he will confront those famous figures in history, and his blood will boil. That night, Li Chengqian didn't sleep well, even though he was very eager to have a good sleep and a good mental state to welcome him to the Tang Dynasty and make his debut in the Tang Dynasty Hall. However, no matter how much he tossed and turned, he just didn't sleep well. Before dawn, the old eunuch ordered people to serve Li Chengqian and change his clothes. Li Chengqian has studied the costumes of the Tang Dynasty, but even now, when you ask him to dress himself, he still doesn't understand. Of course, the main issue is that the crown prince has too many dress code requirements. After washing up, Li Chengqian said to the old eunuch, "Have Lu San and the others arrived yet?" After learning that he was going to court today, he arranged for Lu San and his companions to escort him to court today. The eunuch knew what Li Chengqian meant and immediately nodded, saying, "We're all here, Your Highness." He was actually not worried at all about His Highness the Crown Prince going to court this morning. After all, what has been causing a stir outside recently is nothing more than the East Palace wasting food and brewing wine. However, as an informant, he naturally knows why His Highness brews wine, and during this period, he often runs to the wounded barracks. He also knows that His Highness's actions are actually a credit to the country. As long as Your Majesty finds out, there will be no less blame or reward. By the way, I mentioned earlier that this matter is over and I will reward you with a jar of wine. So, today, I will go to the court later. You can go to the warehouse to collect a large jar, and those palace maids and eunuchs who have recently brewed wine will also be rewarded with a small jar each. Anyway, we have to leave. It's better to reward these wines and not waste them. Upon hearing what Li Chengqian said, the old eunuch only considered him happy. After all, others didn't know, and he didn't know yet. This morning's court is destined to be a time for His Highness the Crown Prince to shine. Then I'll thank His Highness for them. At that moment, he didn't refuse and kept sending the Crown Prince out of the East Palace. Outside the East Palace, there were a total of 20.1 wounded soldiers who were injured that day, none of whom were left here. I don't know if it's Li Chengqian with great luck or if these guys are really tough, even those seriously injured can barely take a few steps at this moment. At this moment, everyone looked at Li Chengqian with respect on their faces. There's no way, the vast majority of them, who had already thought they were dead in the beginning, could stand up again now and not be grateful to this crown prince who risked the world's great injustice to save them. Those who are close friends die, in this era, it's like a creed. After looking at the barely supported wounded soldiers, Li Chengqian asked, "Didn't we let them rest first? Why did they all come?" He did not allow these barely able wounded soldiers to come. "Your Highness, it doesn't matter. We are all rough people. Since Your Highness doesn't give up and pity our humble life, it's natural for him to be loyal at all times," Lu San immediately said. He certainly knows how much trouble the Crown Prince has caused for these people, and this is also a way for them to show their loyalty. Li Chengqian nodded and didn't say much, it didn't matter. Anyway, after today, he was going to fish into the sea. Thinking this way, I finally glanced at the gate of the Eastern Palace. Not to mention, it's really majestic and spectacular. It's just a pity, after today, this place no longer belongs to me. Sometimes, he actually hesitates whether or not to be so decisive. After all, the feeling of being a crown prince seems to be good. But whenever he held such a lucky mentality, he would glance at his dog-crawling brush handwriting, and finally completely dispel the idea of luck in his heart. After all, this is not my era, nor is it my era, at least not now. Taking a final glance at the towering palace, Li Chengqian silently said in his heart, "I will come back again." I don't know if his words are comforting or deceiving me. End of this chapter. What is wrong with Volume 1 of Chapter 7? You are listening at novelfull.audio. What is wrong with Volume 1 of Chapter 7? When Li Chengqian and his group arrived at the Tai Chi Palace with lanterns, all the civil and military officials had already taken their positions and were entering according to their official ranks. As for why the lantern was lit, there was no other way. Li Er was too ruthless, and when he went to court, the sky was not even bright. Upon seeing Li Chengqian's arrival, everyone also bowed and bowed. Although a large group of people among the bowers had written impeachment memorials against him, the proper etiquette of the monarch and ministers was not appropriate. Even Li Ku and Li Tai, who are watching the excitement, are like this. Li Chengqian didn't care about these things. It's just the first time I've experienced so many people going to morning court together, and I feel a bit shocked. Although I have experienced this scene in my original memory, it is still slightly different from what I saw with my own eyes. Ordering Lu San and others to wait here, Li Chengqian strode with his head held high and walked towards the leader of the team. As soon as he walked out, Li Tai and Li Ku followed suit. Brother Huang hasn't shown up for a long time, Li Tai said with a smile, his chubby body swaying as he walked. Li Chengqian glanced at the two people following him and recognized them at a glance. How come you and your third brother have time to attend the morning court today? This was Li Chengqian's first time dealing with people with names and surnames in history. When he spoke, his palms were sweating, and he was afraid of revealing his true identity. Li Ku smiled and said, "It is our duty as princes to share the worries of our father and emperor." Compared to Li Tai's obesity, Li Ku is actually a talented person. Not to mention, Li Shimen's sons are not bad looking, but when you think about it, these days, not to mention the royal family, even ordinary noble families, in terms of appearance, are actually impeccable. This is also something that cannot be done. People with power and influence naturally find one of the best wives. Even if our ancestors look unbearable, they can still make a name for themselves through generations of excellent renovations. Of course, Yuqi Jingde doesn't count. I just came to take a look, it's okay anyway, Li Tai said casually. As Li Shimen's most spoiled son, he always speaks like this. Li Chengqian sneered in his heart. He didn't know that these two guys were meant to come and see him make fun of them, but he didn't expose them at the moment. He encouraged them a few words as his elder brother, but he didn't say anything more. Before standing in front of the officials, no matter how nervous Li Chengqian was or how much sweat he sweated in his palms, he still mustered up his energy and stood at the head of the team like a benchmark. As for appreciating the majesty of the Tai Chi Palace, he doesn't have the same intention at the moment. Go to court. Not long after, as eunuchs, the dregs of thousands of years of feudal dynasties, shouted loudly. Li Chengqian took a deep breath and walked forward. Every step, Li Chengqian walked very steadily and heavily, and he was really afraid of any mistakes. As for Li Shimen, who is about to meet his cheap old man and is known as the one emperor for eternity by countless future generations, including him, if you don't get nervous, it's purely a scam. When Li Chengqian arrived at the main hall, he looked up with 3 parts curiosity and 3 parts nervousness. Wow, there was no one there. This instantly added a touch of peace to his uneasy heart. To be honest, the person he feared the most was Li Shimen. After all, the only person in the entire Tang Dynasty who can decide his life or death is Li Er. Of course, there were also disappointments. After all, when he boasted in the past, he mentioned this person a lot. As he was about to see something alive, he didn't notice it, so he naturally felt a bit disappointed. Quickly, everyone took their seats according to their official ranks. After everyone took their seats, Li Er appeared, dressed in a wild dragon robe and wearing a crown that connected to the sky. He felt that his sturdy body had a certain momentum as he sat on the dragon chair. Since Li Shimen came out, Li Chengqian has secretly scrutinized this cheap old man, not to mention, he really has a bit of authority. Looking back, in his previous life, he had seen the largest official who was the director of the neighborhood committee. Who would have thought that today, he can discuss affairs with the ruler of a country and the civil and military officials of the Manchu dynasty? This has to be said to be a manipulation of nature. After meeting the emperor according to etiquette, the early court proceedings officially began. Your Majesty, I have a memorial to begin with. As soon as everyone sat down, an imperial censor stood up with a whiteboard. What the imperial censor was planning to say was actually well known by the civil and military ministers of the Manchu dynasty, including Li sitting on it. In an instant, almost all eyes were focused on Li Chengqian. Being stared at by these 110 people made Li Chengqian even more nervous. His back was soaked in sweat, and he could only sit up straight, which, in the eyes of others, added a touch of feigned calmness. After taking out the memorial from his sleeve cage and submitting it, the imperial censor bowed and said, "Your Majesty, I have recently heard that the Eastern Palace has been spending a lot of money on grain and wine." After speaking, he turned to Li Chengqian and asked, "I dare to ask the Crown Prince if there is this matter." "It's true." Li Chengqian swallowed his saliva to conceal his nervousness. At this moment, he also saw clearly the imperial censor, and his impression seemed to be that he was surnamed Lu, a member of the Fan Yang Lu clan. As for the name, he couldn't remember it. Although he had traveled for so long, he still couldn't fully digest his original memory. Upon hearing Li Chengqian's answer, the censor said with a sorrowful expression, "Your Highness, do you know why our court banned alcohol?" In the early Tang Dynasty, there was a prohibition of alcohol, partly due to successive disasters and partly to stabilize the demand for food supply. Coupled with years of warfare, prohibition became inevitable. Li Chengqian didn't speak, not because he didn't know how to say it, but because he was momentarily nervous and forgot how to speak. Even though he had rehearsed countless times for this in his heart before, when he faced it firsthand, many things did not develop according to his rehearsals. And his silence greatly disappointed the civil and military officials of the Manchu dynasty. Especially Li Shimin, his face showed disappointment. It's not a big deal for the crown prince to make mistakes, but you have to dare to take responsibility and remain silent. What's going on? Behind Li Chengqian, Li Tai and Li Ku watched with great interest. I didn't wake up in vain this morning, it was so exciting from the beginning. The censor sneered inwardly at Li Chengqian's silence. Do you think silence can deceive you? Your Highness, go out and take a look. How many people in Chang'an City are still struggling to eat? As the heir, Your Highness is leading the way in consuming food and brewing wine. How cold the hearts of the people are. As he spoke, the person was already in tears, as if feeling sad for the people in Chang'an City who had no food or clothing to eat. With one hand holding the what board, he waved his sleeve and wiped away a tear that he didn't know existed or not. When he put down his hand, he sternly said in vain, "Is that desire for food really more important than that of our great Tang Dynasty leader?" His demeanor made Li Chengqian look foolish. That's really a look of serving the country and the people, really. But who doesn't know about the civil and military affairs of the Manchu dynasty? This guy is just trying to suppress imperial power. What's his surname? His surname is Lu. Fan Yang's Lu family's Lu. But no matter why he did this, at least what he said was true, so Man Chaoan and Wu turned their attention to Li Chengqian again, wanting to hear what he said. At this moment, Li Chengqian had already made up his mind to leave the Tang dynasty. This guy, who had never heard of a name in his past life, has shown such behavior, let alone those who have written extensively in history. Looking at the civil and military officials in the court wanting to hear his own answer, Li Chengqian had to stand up. After all, his battlefield had arrived. After taking a deep breath, Li Chengqian said loudly, "As the crown prince, I did not forcefully seize power, nor did I use my power to suppress others. My expenses were all part of the Eastern Palace's share. I dare to ask why I was wrong." After he finished speaking, a stone stirred up 1,000 waves. In an instant, the entire court became chaotic. End of this chapter. Chapter 8, Volume 1. Debate on Wei Zheng. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8, Volume 1. Debate on Wei Zheng. The Crown Prince's statement is false. Li Chengqian's words caused public anger, and another person stood up. Wei Zheng, a humble minister, has something to say. In fact, Wei Zheng did not want to make a fuss at this moment. Although he did not approve of Li Chengqian's behavior, it did not mean that he recognized that aristocrats could use it to criticize imperial power. Ultimately, Li Chengqian was only in his teens at this time, and making such a mistake was not unacceptable. Besides, if a crown prince in his teens doesn't make any mistakes, wouldn't these civil and military ministers lose their place of use? It's not that everyone is good teachers, but you have to give us the opportunity to share our knowledge, experience, and insights, right? But Li Chengqian's words just now really stimulated Wei Zheng. Without considering so much, he immediately stood up. Seeing the person standing up announcing their home door, Li Chengqian was also slightly stunned. Is this Wei Zheng? Wei Depengzi, known as the Eternal Mirror. As soon as Wei Zheng stood up, the former imperial censor took advantage of the situation and retreated. Since this one has come out, it has nothing to do with him. He has already finished what he needs to do. If you have anything to say, just say it. Li Shimin felt impatient when he saw Wei Zheng stand up. This guy is really annoying. Just now, when he heard Li Chengqian's remarks, he was actually somewhat pleased. Regardless of right or wrong, just mentioning Li Chengqian's resounding rhetorical questions was quite a bit of his former demeanor. There are also those generals who share the same idea as him. As veteran soldiers on the battlefield, they like Li Chengqian's tough demeanor. There's no way they can handle it, but the rough guy can't think of so many tricks. Wei Zheng ignored these and turned directly to look at Li Chengqian, saying, Your Highness knows that in the first year of Zhenguan, there was a severe drought in both areas. In March of the following year, locust infestations were widespread in the Guanyi area, with thousands of miles of bare land. In the same summer, there was another severe drought in the Guanyi area. Throughout the third year of the Zhenguan reign, there was still a severe drought in the Guanyi region, and at the same time, 5 provinces were hit by locust infestations again. In the fourth year of the Zhenguan reign, there was the same severe drought and locust plague. Every time he said a word, his tone rose 1 point, and finally, he said in a desolate voice, Since the reform, this year has been a good year, but even so, there are many people who cannot eat enough and have no food to eat. Your Highness, have you ever regretted this thought? Wei Zheng didn't criticize this time. He was just explaining a fact, but this fact made all the civil and military officials present in the court silent. The past few years have indeed been full of disasters and difficulties, and the hardships involved may not be enough for outsiders. But Li Chengqian breathed a sigh of relief. It's good to reason, so I'll slowly reason with you. I'm not afraid of reasoning, I'm afraid you'll criticize me. After bowing and bowing, Li Chengqian said, Duke Wei is right. Over the years, the court has indeed been struggling, but there is one thing I don't know. Can Duke Wei help me clarify this? Your Highness, please speak. Wei Zheng was quite polite today. But these people are all like this. Just now, Duke Wei mentioned that there are many people who cannot eat enough and have nothing to eat. This was the first time Li Chengqian had a confrontation with the famous mirror of the ages in history. Li Chengqian was still a bit nervous, but since Wei Zheng wanted to take on the airs of an elder to teach, don't blame me, a future gang spirit, for teaching you a lesson. I dare ask Duke Wei, the people cannot eat enough and have nothing to eat, but he alone planned to take their last grain of food or forcibly took their last piece of clothing. In the end, Li Chengqian also regained his composure, raised his voice, and angrily said, Why did the court officials impose such evil deeds on me? What is the reason? In an instant, the court fell silent. They didn't expect Li Chengqian to be so tough. To be honest, it is unreasonable to impose natural and man-made disasters on Li Chengqian, but that's not the case. A group of officials were so angry that they only fiddled around. They were not angry that Li Chengqian was brewing wine in the Eastern Palace, but rather worried that this Tang Dynasty heir did not show mercy to the people. 200 years later, when Li, who does not pity the people, ascends to power, can the people of this world still have a good life? Of course, those generals are enjoying it at this moment. They don't care about these things. Anyway, they think the crown prince today is good. Over the years, there have been many tough Wei Jing people, but none like Li Chengqian. And Li Tai and Li Ku sat there, smiling as they watched everything. Got it, the crown prince and the civil servant got it. As for Li Er, he looked at Li Chengqian with surprise. In the past, Li Chengqian's weakness was the most worrying for him, but today's performance surprised him a bit. Looking back at Wei Zheng, he wasn't in a hurry to speak. He just looked at Li Chengqian and remained silent for a long time. I don't know how long it took, but Wei Zheng sighed and said, "No one says it's your highness's fault, but why can't your highness worry about the people of Dawn? You should know that the food that his highness spends on brewing can help many suffering people through this cold winter, and this is not the heaviest. May I ask, at this moment, among the 110 high-ranking officials of the Tang Dynasty in the court, who did not have enough grain in their granaries, just accused the censor of Fan Yang. Half of Fan Yang's land were in the hands of the Lu family, and the abundance of the Lu family's granaries was not inferior to that of the court. Not to mention the Lu family, at this moment in the court, whose granary has not reserved 3 or 2 years of grain. Why are you only staring at me? Or is it that being alone and young can be left to your control?" Li Chengqian never gave Wei Zheng a chance to finish speaking. He knew what he was trying to say, but it was just the crown prince brewing wine, which played a bad leading role. But he didn't want to delve into this issue at all. From the beginning, every word he said was carefully considered and deliberately arranged to raise crucial questions. However, at this time, the civil servants did not know why and did not mention the root of the problem, so Li Chengqian added another touch of fire. On the high seat, Li Shimin watched all of this with great interest and said to himself, "Not bad, not bad." At least today, Li Chengqian's performance was good and he was very satisfied. As an emperor, he doesn't care about right or wrong, let alone the fact that Li Chengqian's brewing was not wrong. What he cares about is how to deal with the civil and military affairs of the Manchu dynasty as a crown prince and crown prince. As for Li Chengqian's mention of the issue of food in everyone's family, it's not nonsense. Let's not talk about the 5 gates and 7 ambitions. With a 1,000-year-old family, the foundation is too deep. Let's talk about those new nobles who followed Li Shimin to conquer the world. Which one is not the big landlord of Chang'an City? Is there a shortage of food at home? This is not nonsense. For a moment, the court became quiet again. Because there is no way to refute this matter, who dares to step forward and say that my granary is so empty that I starve mice to death? It is estimated that others will drown me with spittle stars. Even Wei Zheng dare not say these words. Humph. Seeing no one speaking, Li Chengqian snorted coldly and added a knife. It turns out that the way of the sage is only used to demand the royal family, and it seems that you heir and others are not of much use. That's it, why bother reading the books of sages? Okay. On the high seat, Li Shimin applauded and exclaimed, how well this knife was done. He clenched his fist and was very happy. These literati liked to use the way of sages to contain imperial power, and now they were commanded by Li Chengqian. Okay, that's right. At this moment, the general's ranks heard a shout of goodwill, different from the emperor only daring to shout in his heart. This guy just shouted out loud. End of this chapter. Chapter 9, Volume 1. The Bar Spirit from Later Generations. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9, Volume 1. The Bar Spirit from Later Generations. Humph, Duke Su, you're a martial artist and don't understand anything, so don't speak up. The person who just spoke was the famous 3-board axe Cheng Yaojin. And now standing up is Kong Yingda. These two people have always been like this, looking at each other with displeasure. Li Chengqian carefully watched every change in the main hall, and couldn't help but wonder which one was not a hero of this era who could go to court. As for Cheng Yaojin jumping out to help the venue, he was not surprised. The generals of this year, following Li Shimin's campaigns to the south and north, were originally a group of rebellious and unruly individuals. However, he still had to handle the changes that appeared on the main hall with caution and did not rush to speak out. I don't understand anything, but I just think your Highness's words make sense. Just now your Highness mentioned the food in your family, you dare not say it, I dare. My family's food, not to mention eating until next year, even if it is eaten until the year after tomorrow, it is not a problem. Aren't your families like this? Your Highness, as the head of the Eastern Palace, does not steal or rob. He uses his own grain to brew wine, which is none of your business. Speaking, Zheng stood up. He is reckless, but not foolish. Although there is a prohibition on alcohol in the court, among the noble families, who hasn't made wine, especially among the martial elites, who hasn't had a brewing workshop yet. It's just that no one is as famous for brewing wine as Donggong. Everyone is well aware of this matter. We can't let these people hold a big teacup and shout at each other during a banquet, go. Isn't this his mother bullshit? Li Chengqian's move was not a matter of brewing wine in itself, but you have been keeping an eye on it. When the time comes, pull out the radish and bring out the mud, and everyone will eat together. What are you thinking? Kong Yingda was quite angry, but he still couldn't refute it. As Cheng Yaojin said, who hasn't stored any food in their house yet? The vertical pole is not worth plotting. Unable to tear it apart, Kong Yingda angrily shook her sleeve. Humph. Cheng Yaojin didn't get used to him and retaliated without hesitation, who wants to be with you, such a sour scholar. Watching these two people arguing again, Fang Xianling, as the left assistant minister of the Imperial Secretariat, finally stood up and said, what is the proper way to do this and this in the court? Humph. Cheng Yaojin had no objection to Fang Xianling. At least, in his heart, Fang Xianling could not be considered a sour scholar. He snorted coldly at Kong Yingda and then went back to sit down. Watching Cheng Yaojin calm down, Kong Yingda arched his hand at Li Shimin before turning to Li Chengqian and saying, Your Highness is absolutely right. Who in the civil and military families of the Manchu dynasty has not yet accumulated enough food, but Your Highness has overlooked that we, as people, also have to support our families. Not to mention the families of our nobles, but also the families of our officials and servants, there are still 110 people, not to mention the tenants who depend on us. Storing some food is just for emergency situations when necessary. Besides, when the national dynasty was hit by a disaster, Your Highness could ask the princes of the Manchu dynasty who hasn't opened a kanji shed to make kanji. Far away, I would say that before the plague of locusts in the Shanhaiguan Pass, thousands of miles away, countless refugees poured into Chang'an. At that time, there were dozens of kanji sheds outside Chang'an. Where did they come from? Saying these things is not to invite credit to us, nor is it to hope that His Highness will sing praises for us. It is just to let His Highness know how to use food. Li Chengqian was stunned, yes, he was really stunned there. It's not that he was shocked by what Kong Yingda said, but that these literati are too gentle. Both Wei Zheng and Kong Yingda are like this. This is different from what he rehearsed. In his rehearsal, shouldn't these civil servants pounce on him like crazy dogs, insisting on giving him a reputation of daring to speak and admonishing, fearless of the powerful? Why have you become so gentle today? I'm so excited about you. When you come up like a wolf and tear off my camouflage layer by layer, I'm ready for his mother. As a result, will you show me this? This makes me not even have a reason to throw a tantrum. How could I make a scene in the court and run away from Chang'an in a fit of anger? No, you can't show the courage to criticize me like you did with Li Er, okay? I beg to spray. He didn't know that these people had different attitudes towards him and Li Er. Li Er was already an emperor, and his words and actions had a great impact on this country. Moreover, Li Er's cognitive system had already formed, and sometimes when he couldn't win by reasoning, he could only vent his anger. But Li Chengqian is different. Although he is a crown prince, he is still young and can still be shaped. He can use reason to influence him and make him realize his mistakes, isn't it good? Overall, the Tang Dynasty was an era of tolerance, capable of accommodating both foreign generals and the crown prince's unintentional mistakes. Of course, not every civil servant is like Wei Zheng and Kongingda, and there is also a small group of people who want to use Li Chengqian to boost their reputation. Firstly, Wei Zheng has taken the lead and there is no chance. Li, in a few months it will be Li Er's birthday, and I'm afraid Li Chengqian will come and say something. He brewed wine to prepare a gift for Li Er's birthday. Li Chengqian didn't know these things. At this moment, he was very panicked. He couldn't do it, he had to find a way to anger this group of people. Suddenly, with a flash of inspiration, he wished he could slap himself with his hand. How could I forget that I am a spirit from the future? With a contemptuous smile, Li Chengqian said, I don't know how to use grain. If I don't say anything else, let's talk about the brewing process. The brewing process I improved, who in the whole Tang Dynasty can stand out from it? The crown prince of the Tang Dynasty, the heir-in-chief of the country, was responsible for craftsmen. Is this the book of sages that His Royal Highness has read? The Lu surname censor, who had already retreated to the rear, once again stood up upon hearing Li Chengqian's words. He did not forget that Li Chengqian had previously mentioned the abundance of his Lu family's grain depot and mocked them for reading books of sages in vain. Now, seizing the opportunity, he had no choice but to counterattack and threw the same problem at Li Chengqian. Seeing him stand up again, Li Chengqian's heart was filled with joy. Wei Zheng, Kongingda, with such a gentle spring breeze and gentle rain, I can't resist it. But you, who are so aggressive, I am most delighted. I immediately said, do you look down on craftsmen, or do you think craftsmen are lower than you, a scholar? Since ancient times, there has been a consensus among scholars, farmers, merchants, and merchants. Your Highness, it is better to read more books, said Lu Yushe disdainfully. Then I would like to ask Lord Lu, who first mentioned the concept of agriculture, commerce, and farmers. Li Chengqian was overjoyed and finally found a breakthrough point. This person surnamed Lu is really a good person. This. Lu Yushe was also embarrassed now. The embarrassment was not because he didn't know who said this sentence, on the contrary, it was because he knew that it was embarrassing. Seeing him like this, Li Chengqian sneered and said, since Lord Lu dare not speak, or is it embarrassing to say so, why not help Lord Lu say what? Before Lu Yushe could speak, Li Chengqian continued, during the spring and autumn period, the famous minister of Qi, Guanzhong, once said, those who are scholars, farmers, merchants, and the four people are also the stone people of the country. Lord Lu, have you ever said something wrong? Upon hearing Li Chengqian's words, Lu Yushe instinctively felt that something was wrong, but for now he could only nod in recognition. But what Li Chengqian wanted was to stimulate these guys and make them stand on the opposite side of him. He wouldn't let them go, so he continued, but among the scholars, farmers, industry and commerce, and the four people mentioned by the Prime Minister, none of them are scholars. Isn't that Yushe? At this moment, Qing Yaojin, the best comedian, once again raised doubts. Li Chengqian gave him a slight smile and said, as far as the public of Sugua is aware, the officials, farmers, artisans, and merchants referred to as soldiers, farmers, craftsmen, and merchants by Guanxiang back then, but there are no scholars. After speaking, he turned to the censor Lu and asked, do you have any objections to this, Lord Lu, who has read a lot of poetry? End of this chapter. Chapter 10 Volume 1. The Crown Prince, Don't Do It. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Volume 1. The Crown Prince, Don't Do It. At this moment, Lu Yushe's forehead was sweating and he had a fart's opinion. Absurdity. Seeing that the person surnamed Lu was stopped by Li Chengqian, another person stood up, Your Highness is really eloquent, but it's just sophistry. This person's surname is Cui, and their Cui family is widely recognized as the highest gate in the world and the head of the northern noble family. In fact, to put it simply, it's just monopolizing knowledge with several other aristocrats. Yes, nowadays, almost all the scholars come from their 5 schools and 7 perspectives. And their Chui family alone occupies the second place in the 5 gates and 7 views. Li Chengqian's criticism of scholars was actually criticizing these aristocratic families. Therefore, when he saw that Lu Yushe couldn't resist or didn't have a chance to react, he immediately stood up and said, "What is the relationship between the officials in charge of agriculture, commerce, and industry in the current scholars? The true determination of the 4 people began from the Han Dynasty." "I'll go, you're really shameless." Li Chengqian didn't expect this guy to be extremely shameless. At the moment, I could only sigh and say, when it comes to sophistry, it's still Mr. Chui who is better. I once heard that a scholar is not only the person who needs face the most in the world, but also the person who can put down face the most. I used to have deep doubts about this, but after seeing Mr. Chui, I actually began to believe it. After he finished speaking, a burst of laughter erupted in the ranks of the generals. And those civil servants also shook their heads secretly. "This is just a pit. How dare you still jump inside with such a jerk?" Since you used ancient beliefs as a footnote for the 4 people, Li Chengqian traced the source and brought out Guanzhong to refute it, which already had an advantage. However, this person surnamed Chui actually claimed that the true determination of the 4 people started from the Han Dynasty. That's right, but isn't it that the 4 people of the Han Dynasty originated from Guanxiang? The person surnamed Chui actually knows that saying this is extremely shameless, but there is no other way. The head of the 4 people is the root of their noble family. To say disrespectful words, they have never seen a 1,000-year-old dynasty, but there are more than 1,000-year-old aristocratic family. What does it rely on? It's just that they monopolize knowledge. Sharp and sarcastic words should not come from a prince's mouth. Chui is not a fuel-efficient lamp either. Faced with the ridicule of the generals, his face remained calm and his heart skipped a beat, as if it had nothing to do with him. Before Li Chengqian could speak, he continued, "Since Qin, Li Si has assisted Emperor Shi Huang in governing the world, Shao He has laid the foundation for Han Gaozu for 400 years, and Dong Zhongshu has created the foundation for Emperor Wu of Han for eternity. Why does your highness turn a blind eye to countless literati and scholars who have been guarding and educating the land and herdsmen of emperors throughout history? Since you literati and scholars are so powerful, in the next war, our court will not send a large army and let you literati and scholars go." As a descendant, Li Chengqian was very resistant to the words of scholars, farmers, and merchants, and when speaking now, he also had no sense of propriety. Bold. Finally, Li Er, who had not spoken yet, spoke up. "Although Li Erii has been trying to suppress the aristocratic class, there is one thing you must admit. Governing the world cannot be separated from them. This is reality." As soon as Li Er spoke, Li Chengqian also shut up. He regretted it a bit. He had just lost his pride and thought it was a sparring among future generations. Now he still felt a wave of shock, and he didn't know if they had noticed anything. And when the person surnamed Chui saw Li Er scolding Li Chengqian, he immediately said, "Your Majesty, your Highness the Crown Prince is young and ignorant. He should have been tempted by treacherous people. I request your Majesty to replace all the officials in the Eastern Palace and select another talented person to teach His Highness the teachings of the sages." "I support it," Lu Yushe said immediately upon seeing the situation. Meanwhile, more civil servants have also stepped forward. As for Wei Zheng, he didn't say a word at this moment. He had been looking at Li Chengqian and always felt that something was wrong with what happened today. Glancing at Li Er and seeing that he had no reaction, Li Chengqian boldly said, "You all have put on such a big hat. I don't know where I went wrong, and how did I get tempted by treacherous people? His Highness the Crown Prince spends a lot of food and brews wine for temporary pleasure, causing a stir in public opinion throughout Chang'an City. Isn't it because he was tempted by treacherous people?" Lu Yushe said with a righteous expression. Li Chengqian snorted coldly and said, brewing wine was a solitary decision. Since the solitary decision to brew wine, none of the officials in the East Palace have been seen. How did they deceive them? Finally, I have come back to this topic. He is really tired, so he wants to end it quickly and leave quickly. This court is becoming increasingly impatient because he has seen a look of doubt in Wei Zheng's eyes. Your Highness, that's a big mistake. Lu Yushe arched his hand and said, Your Majesty, the Crown Prince doesn't care about the people, acts recklessly, wastes food, and is afraid of triggering a new round of brewing controversy. Nowadays, there are still people in the Tang Dynasty who cannot eat enough, and this trend cannot last long. Before Li Chengqian could speak, Li Chengqian said first, What's wrong with me using my own grain to brew wine? Is it true that I was the only one brewing wine in the entire Tang Dynasty? Why do you insist on imposing such evil deeds on me? What is the reason? Besides, if you don't empathize with the people, who among your noble families is not? You said that there were still people in the Tang Dynasty who couldn't eat enough, but as a noble family, any family that opened a granary might be able to solve the problem, right? Why can't you sympathize with those people who cannot eat enough? Or do you mean that you already have no people in your hearts? This is the key to the problem and also the necessary trigger for his throwing, so he has been emphasizing it. Humph, Lord Kong has already answered this question before, I don't want to say much. Lu Yushe was almost furious. You're trying to dig the roots of my Lu family. At the moment, he also said without hesitation, Since your Highness has repeatedly asked why there is anything wrong, then I will tell your Highness. If anyone were to brew wine without permission, we would not say anything, because as your Highness said, using our own grain to brew wine neither forcibly nor with force. Although this behavior is illegal, it is still within an acceptable range. Only your Highness, this is not appropriate, cannot be done, and doing it would be your Highness's immoral and wrong. Here we go. Finally here. Li Chengqian was ecstatic in his heart, but with a sneer on his face, he said, Why? Not for any reason, just because your Highness is the Crown Prince, this move cannot be done, it is wrong. Lu Yushe said coldly. This is the key to the problem. Actually, brewing wine is not a big deal at all. The key is for the Crown Prince to brew wine. Otherwise, you look at the civil and military affairs of the entire court. Who hasn't brewed wine, but who have they accused? That is to say, there are some things that you can do but I cannot do because I am the Crown Prince. Li Chengqian continued to question. At this point, Lu Yushe stopped being careless and said bluntly, Yes, as the saying goes, if you want to wear a crown, you must bear its weight. That's the truth. Ha ha ha. After he finished speaking, Li Chengqian sneered coldly. Slowly, the laughter grew louder and more unrestrained. Everyone didn't know what he was laughing at. Finally, when Li Chengqian finished laughing, he loudly said, Okay. If someone wants to wear his crown, he must bear its weight. Since that's the case, the Crown Prince doesn't want to do it. As he spoke, Li Chengqian reached out to take off his hairpin, took off his distant travel crown from above, and for a moment, his hair was disheveled, leaving everyone dumbfounded. Even Li Chengqian couldn't help but stand up. Why is that all? End of this chapter.